Welcome to another episode of Home Sweet Home. My name is Rod McCall.
And I'm Scott Nichols.
So what's going on? How are you?
I'm well, and you?
Well, as somebody told me a long time ago, finer than a frog's hair split three ways.
Yeah. I'm still not sure what that means.
Okay, well, you ever seen a frog's hair?
I've heard you say it before, but I don't know. I guess I'm from New Hampshire originally, so I don't know if.
Okay.
I just don't think we had those kinds of sayings.
No. Okay. Well, I've been accused of having rodisms.
You have, and you do sometimes. My problem is I don't know if they're just rodisms or if it's an actual saying that people in the area where you grew up.
Oh, well, yeah, it's a colloquialism.
I just don't know, right?
So, anyway, we had Charlie Phillips with us, a very well-respected Collin County family law attorney with us last time, and we were able to persuade him to stick around and do another episode with us. So, Charlie, welcome back.
Well, Rod, thanks for having me back. I really enjoyed the last program, and I want to say that I was raised about 50 miles east of here, where it was finer than a frog's hair split four ways.
Four ways?
Not three ways.
Four, okay.
Okay, well.
So that's even better, right?
It's even finer.
Even finer. I'm getting there.
Okay. Well, Charlie, I'm glad you stuck around because last time we had a really great conversation talking about some of the things that can cause mom and dad to divorce. And so I appreciate your insight and sharing with us. And so that it got me thinking about another topic that is near and dear to my heart, and that is co-parenting. One of the big reasons why mom and dads get divorced a lot is because of a disagreement over how to parent. And so when you divorce, I'm going to parent my way. And the other parent goes, well, I'm going to parent my way. And sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. And so And I was at a conference, presented at a conference down in Houston here recently, where it was all about family law and mostly centered around co-parenting. And I got to say, Sherry and her ex-husband, it was rough at first, but they really co-parented well. And they worked together, they raised the kids, and they put kids ahead of their anger and frustration with each other. And I feel like when mom and dad can do that, the kids benefit.
Sure.
Okay. So the other side comes, what happens when mom and dad cannot co-parent very well?
Well, let me say this. I think that it is much easier to get along in an unhappy relationship than it is to live as divorced parents, because you have to cooperate more with your ex-spouse than you do when you were married to them. It is a very difficult proposition, and when you have, in most families, traditional family, we will call it. I don't know that it's traditional anymore, where both parents are the parents of the children living in the home. There generally becomes a disciplinarian parent and another parent in the relationship, and both parents rely on each other for what they're good at. Just for example, not saying this is true in every case, but mother is more nurturing and father is the disciplinarian. And I can't tell you how many times in my childhood I heard, you just wait until your father gets home.
That was the scariest thing.
And not a good thing in my case.
No, no. In fact, one of my sisters was, I won't mention her name, Deanna, but we were sent to our room, or she was sent to her room, and knowing that a whooping was coming, I mean, I say a whooping, it was a couple of swats on the butt. Nothing hard, nothing serious, but to us it was always, getting really bad. Anyway, she got caught putting on like 24 pairs of underwear
24
to soften the blow.
Wow.
So anyway,
That's thinking ahead.
well,
Context.
yeah, sorry about that. So anyway, but yeah, in our house too, that was, mom would go, you know what? I've had enough of you. You wait till your dad gets home. You go to your room. And yeah, that was worse. I felt like the fear factor.
Yeah, my wife used that as well with our children.
And I can promise you, I had the honor of knowing both your mom and dad. And if you think about that and you take it a step further, if your mother and father had divorced, every one of you and your sisters would have wanted to be with mom 100% of the time, because children, just like electricity and water, they take the path of least resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And although every child will never admit it, they need rules. They need boundaries set for them, but it's the enforcer who is going to be the least loved if the choice is left to children, who should never think that they have a choice between mom and dad. That is perhaps the worst thing you can let a child think, is that they have some kind of choice. My youngest daughter reminded me frequently that she didn't get to choose her parents. And believe me, it hit home. And when you arm a child with just the thought that they can get their way by loving mom more than dad, or loving dad more than mom, you have now given the child the authority over the parent that the parent should rightly have over the child in order to successfully rear a child. And you cannot vest that kind of authority in a child, or even let them think they have that kind of authority. It destroys the parent's right to raise their child as they see fit and moral.
Okay.
I think that path of least resistance, that struck something with me here. It's that I think that, we experience with our own kids that playing one against the other, right? Where the child wants something, so they figured out, well, dad will say yes to this, or mom will say yes to that. Or it might be that, we'll go ask your dad about that. And so they figure out how to get what they want by playing them. And it seems to me, and I don't have any experience with it, obviously I've seen other families go through this, but it must get exponentially worse if you get divorced and now you have to manage the children apart. I mean, that must get a lot harder.
Well, and I'm going to put it back on you, because you've been happily married for 32 years and you've raised 3 children.
Yes.
Right? And you've seen it go on in a happy family where mom and dad still love each other, and you know that your children figured out who would give them what when it came to parents. And it is not exponentially, it is explosively larger in a divorced setting. Because the disciplinarian parent is naturally going to be the last choice. And I've seen countless times what I call the circus dad, who will do anything to buy their children's affection and loyalty. And they will do it and consciously say negative things about the other parent. And here's something I believe, and I say, if not daily, weekly, that every child believes that they are half mom and one half dad.
Yeah.
And if mom is saying that dad is crazy, that child thinks they're half crazy. If dad, on the other hand, is saying mom is crazy, that child now thinks I came from two crazy parents. There's no hope for me. I'm going to be crazy when I grow up. And that is the child who has such low self-esteem that they will be the one with drug issues, mental health issues, acting out issues about the time they get to high school or their teenage years. They will manifest that low self-esteem that they received unknowingly by the parents. They thought they were doing the right thing for their child, when in fact they loved each other enough to bring a child into this world, and now they hate each other enough to destroy the child in the process. And it is such a damaging thing for a young child's psyche, and especially their self-esteem.
I recently, in this presentation that I did down in Houston, one of the things I was exploring was the impact of depression. And when mom or dad are suffering from depression, their ability, which in a divorce, you're going to go through depression. All my work with the divorce group and all the stuff that I've done over the last, 13 years, almost everybody suffers at least some piece of depression.
Sure.
And when you as a parent are depressed, and again, through divorce you're focused way more on your needs. Well, when you have a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 10, 12, 14, 16-year-old, whatever it might be, they are ignored. Maybe you provide for them in the most basic function of a place to live and food to eat. But you're not, even then, it might be fast food, or takeout. You're not cooking meals. And we did a whole thing on the impact that food has on your mental health. But when you're not spending time to take care of your children's emotional needs, then the kids have a better than average chance of becoming depressed themselves. And then you're right, having all those problems, they act out in school. They become, more willing to try drugs and alcohol, early onset of sex. And I'm sorry to say, but they also have a higher risk of suicide.
It's a lack of nurturing.
Yeah, at the end of the day. And so if mom and dad want to be effective co-parents, then put kids first.
And it is so easy to say, but so hard to do. I think I make a lot of money off the parent who wants to be declared the last one who was right in the final argument. And if they didn't get it in the divorce, they're going to come back for the modification. And they're going to pay me a ton so that the judge will say, you know what, Dad? You know what, Mom? You were right and the other side was wrong. And guess how many times I've heard a judge say that? 0. It doesn't happen. But they're too focused on their own emotions to even consider what it's doing to that child that they brought into this world and what effects it will have later in life.
Thank you. I went through this, and I will say that in the very beginning, when Eric's mom and I split, there was by both of us, but I would be lying if I didn't say I did not engage in an attempt to win his favor. I mean, he and I were together all the time during the marriage. I did a vast percentage of the raising, the cooking, the bathing, the transportation to and from daycare and school and all of that. And so it was hard for me to go from being a 90% dad to what felt like less than 50% dad. And there was a lot of hurt and a lot of anger and a lot of frustration on my part. And I was not taking care of him in the way he needed to. And it took me probably 5, 6 months to come to understand what I was doing and watching the impact it was having on him. And I did try to change. I did try to focus on, well, let's do stuff that you want to do. Well, let's go to the park. Let's go do things together. I'm not going to spend money on buying you something, but I will spend money on games for us to play, things for us to do together. I can't give you money, but I can give you time. And I always felt that that was a much healthier investment in him.
I don't disagree with you. I had a judge tell me once that there was no such thing as quality time. There was just time. And your example about a depressed parent, that does not represent just time. That is the lack of quality time when you're so focused on yourself that you don't care about your child's emotions. They're secondary. And you did the right thing by investing your time doing things that your child enjoyed, because that makes such a closer bond between a parent and a child. And I think that bond, and I'm speaking generally to men in this regard, that bond is an investment in the first 3 years of your child's life, because I truly believe that how much time you spend with your child as an infant and a toddler makes all the difference in the world of who that child will come home to see when they take a break from college or take a break from life to come back to their home and their hometown, and which parent they spend that time with. It's going to be the parent that took the time to bond with them as an infant or a toddler. And that's, again, all of these are my opinions. I'm by no means the parent expert. I've said numerous times that I've never found the perfect parent, and they certainly didn't exist for my children either.
I think that's true, though. I mean, I think we're reflecting on my own experience with my kids. I mean, I still have adult children that still come back to me to seek advice or, get help with something. I mean, I didn't do much more than just spend a lot of time with them, as much as I could. And even to the point of choosing to, leave a particular career, because if I stayed in it, I would have been commuting all the time and not spending time with my kids. And I felt like it was more important for me to spend time with my family than it was to go make the fortunes and money.
And I tell people almost daily that every second that you miss with your child is a second that you will not get back.
Yeah, it's gone.
And it's that important. And I know that raising my own children, if I was not here in this office, I was wherever my children were. Yeah. Not necessarily at home. If they were somewhere else, that's where I was going to be, because I didn't want to miss a second of it.
Even in the things that we did, we always brought our kids with us to virtually everything that we did.
Well, I have to admit that only worked for high school football until both of my daughters were about the age 6 or 7. And then I announced that I would be an absentee parent on Friday nights between the end of August and Christmas.
Sure. Well, football is important.
So. Well, yes.
We are in Texas.
Well, my daughters learned that lesson well.
Do you think?
Do they watch football now, though?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, see, there you go.
Do you think age matters when the kids, when mom and dad divorce, and the time that you spend with them and the impact that divorce has on the kids?
When you first asked with age matters, I think age of the parent matters, because I was the product of older parents who could not go out in the yard and wrestle with me as a young man, but they certainly had a great deal more wisdom to pass on than the younger parents who I grew up with their children. But I believe that the younger a child is, the more responsibility they take on for their parents' divorce. And when I say responsibility, if you get a 16-year-old, he's probably going to say, it's about time y'all got a divorce. I've seen this coming for quite some time. If you've got a 5-year-old, they are wondering, what is it that I did that caused mom and dad to get this divorce? And I will tell you from experience, since our rules changed a while back, that children used to be able to sign an affidavit of choice of which parent they wanted to basically live with after they were 12 years of age. Now, it wasn't binding on the court. It was just another piece of evidence. But several years ago, they changed that if a child is 12 or older, the court can interview the child in chambers to determine their wishes and desires. Almost without fail, every child that goes in there around the age of 12 wants to know what they can do to get their parents back together, because they want to live with both of them in the same house. And then the judge is left with saying, I can't do that. What's your second choice?
That makes me think of that movie. Have you seen the movie Catch Me If You Can?
No, I never seen movies.
So great movie.
Oh,
have you
that was
seen
Tom
that
Hanks.
Yeah, Tom Hanks was in that.
I have to tell you that reality is all I can handle.
Oh, okay. Well, this is one of those things that I think reflects from your reality that you experience, where one of the one of the main characters
Leonardo
in the movie,
DiCaprio was in that.
DiCaprio was playing the kid. And his parents, suddenly are getting a divorce. I mean, he doesn't even know about it. He walks into the house, the lawyer's there, everything's happening, and he's told, you're gonna take this paper and you're gonna go into the other room and you're gonna take a pen and you're gonna write down who you want to live with. And his response, and I don't want to ruin the movie for everybody, but his response is to run away. He just takes off and never goes back. And so, he doesn't want to make that choice. And I don't think kids want to make that choice. And that's probably not a choice kids should have to make.
That's a pretty advanced thought for a young person to think. I would rather not make that choice, and I'd rather run the risk of being on my own. I think if more children knew or thought that was an option, more children would give that as a response.
Do you think that in this choice where kids age 12 are given an option, do you think that mom or dad would try to brainwash or persuade them to pick me over them?
Yes, by all means. I've had cases where the judge has instructed. Well, there's been cases where I was instructed to go pick the child up and deliver the child to the judge for the judge to talk to the child, because the judge didn't trust either parent to bring the child to the courthouse without woodshedding their child on them being the choice they should make when they've got there. I've had judges instruct both of the parents in open court that someone else is going to bring your child up here to visit with me, and you are not going to tell them or the child what the judge is going to talk to the child about. One judge has even gone as far as saying, you tell that child that the judge heard about him and he's really fascinated about him and he's really looking forward to meeting him and getting to know him. That's why the judge wants to see him. And they will instruct the parents, do not discuss anything about this litigation between now and when that child gets here. Generally speaking, our judges in Collin County, if it's a school day, they're going to find out what time the child gets out of school, give someone enough time to get the child from the school to the courthouse, and deliver the child to the bailiff, who will introduce the judge to the child. And that child, probably the first question after the judge breaks the ice a little bit and explains that they have children too, or tries to get some form of a relationship of trust going with the child, the first question they're going to ask is, did anybody tell you what we were going to talk about, or did anybody tell you what you should say? And most judges will tell you that those children are going to say bad things about both parents because they've finally got someone who cares about them and knows they're not going to use it against them.
Are you familiar with the term parental alienation?
Sadly, too familiar.
Can you explain a little of what you know that to be?
That is where one parent says and does things about the other parent in the presence of the child to express that the other parent is not worthy of being the child's parent, says nothing but disparaging remarks about the other parent in an effort to win the child's love, loyalty, and affection solely for that parent, and to cause that child to question the other parent's very integrity, or causes the child to openly hate the other parent because of what one parent planted in the child's mind. Sometimes it can be done unwittingly, unknowingly, and it happens even in the happiest of marriages that one parent will say negative things about the other parent in order to increase the child's love of the parent who is saying that. It is a horrible and destructive behavior to engage in with any child, telling them that the other parent is worthless.
What would happen to, I'm asking, I think I know the answer to my question, trying to be a good lawyer, asking questions that I know the answer to. But what are some problems with having a child affirm loyalty to one parent or another? I mean, isn't it always daddy's little girl or mom's loyalty? Well, mama's boy has a negative connotation, but moms always treat their sons a lot differently. I mean, my sisters will admit that my mother treats me a lot differently than they ever treated them.
Well, the danger is what it does to the child. And I know I've talked about a child believing they're half mom and believing they're half dad. And if you destroy their image of mom or dad, you're destroying their self-confidence or their self-esteem. And that normally manifests itself when they get to be about the teenage years, some sooner, some later in life. Most mental health disorders start to appear around the teenage years, but that's a field of expertise should not engage in. But what I've seen from experience is that you're going to find that children who've been actively alienated against one parent or the other tend to have emotional issues that could manifest themselves in acting out in their teenage years, criminal behavior, mental health disorders, violations of what are considered the norms of society for someone at that age group. They can engage in abhorrent behavior, and it is all a product of believing that they have a parent who was not fit to be their parent.
Okay.
It is incredibly destructive to the mental health of a young child.
I've got to believe that kind of treatment of the child in those situations must lead that to eventual very dysfunctional other relationships that child is going to have as an adult.
Sure, and oftentimes I look at unhealthy marriages, and parents come to me and they say, I've stayed together because I thought it was best for my child, and I've asked them, well, is that the kind of relationship that you want your child to enter into as an adult? Are you teaching them that this is how a marriage should be run?
Right.
By your behavior and by staying in it? Because if you are, you're teaching them the wrong thing. And I think, and I have not seen it in my experience thus far, but children of an alienated parent are more likely to become an alienating parent themselves when they get up to the years of having children.
Sure. I think it's instructive that, like children are, and I'm not by any means any kind of a psychologist or, somebody who is in that kind of field, but it just seems obvious to me that children learn things by observing.
Very much so.
And then repeating, right? So, I mean, it's how they learn the language. It's how they learn to act, how they learn to eat, how they learn to dress themselves. I mean, and it just comes down to that's how they learn to have relationships.
Yes.
That's how they learn to be a husband or a wife. It's how they learn to be a good worker. And so when you're exhibiting the wrong things, they're going to learn how to do that.
In every divorce with children that I handle, I tell the parent I'm representing that I want their child to think they have the greatest dad in the world and to think they have the greatest mom in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's not true, and I've not seen the greatest mom and the greatest dad. That certainly didn't exist for my children. But I do believe that every child deserves to think that.
Sure.
And whenever one parent is saying or doing something negative toward the other parent in the presence of the child, they are stealing that right from the child.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Can a kid refuse to go with mom or dad on visitation?
No, they cannot. Have I seen them do it? Yes. And generally speaking, if we have the parent who believes that the child doesn't want to go with the other parent, we will tell them, look, the other parent picks them up at your home at 6 o'clock. You need to open the door and say, there's your child. Use all legal means necessary to observe your visitation and stay out of the picture. You're not encouraging them to get physical with the child. You're not encouraging them to call the police to get the child to go, but you're allowing them to be a parent and to do what they believe is necessary without harm, physical harm to the child, to get the child to go with them. Most of the time, and I'm not saying this is 100% of the time, but most of the time, a child will only develop that kind of disdain for the other parent if they've heard it from the parent they are currently living with.
Wow.
I have rarely seen a child, except for the cases of clear abuse, where a child is that dead set on not going with the other parent without some degree of influence by the parent who is standing there releasing the child to the other parent.
In full disclosure, I went through this with Eric and his mother. She played a wide variety of games, making claims about me that were as false as could be, interfered with visitation, prevented me from seeing him, and tried to schedule events during my time with him. And it was horrible. And it made my ability to try and co-parent way more difficult than I ever thought it should be.
May I ask, and this is related to a question Scott had earlier about how that manifests itself in a child. Did you find your son had developed two personalities?
Yes.
The one that pleases dad and the one that pleases mom?
The one that would please mom would be when mom was visible to him, and he would act belligerent, he would act defiant, combative, and as soon as she was out of sight, his behavior became the child that I knew best before the divorce, the friendly, the loving, the enjoyable child.
Okay. Did your son exhibit those behaviors at or near the time that you were supposed to take possession of your child while he was still in front of his mother?
No. In fact, I even noticed that when he was with me and he had, through school learned how to tell time, he was able to, his behavior, it took me a long time. In fact, it took until after his death for me to really understand that his behavior deteriorated the closer it got to my time to take him back, because he was prepping himself for having to live then with his mother, and the behavior expectations for her, which were way different than mine.
Okay. Did it seem that your child was fearful of doing anything to please you? Because if he pleased you and mom found out about it, there would be retribution.
Yes.
Okay. And so he had a personality that he showed you willingly and freely. He loved you. He was your son when he was not in mom's presence, unless he thought his actions would be reported back to his mother.
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk about two different personalities, I typically see that when one parent comes to me and says, "Oh, you can't believe the fit my child throws before he goes with the other parent. He's crying, he's kicking and screaming, and he doesn't want to go." Classically, the other parent will say, "Yes, that's true. And the first 5 minutes that we're together, the child is crying and screaming and throwing a fit. But 10 minutes down the road, he's happy-go-lucky and we're having a good time as if nothing had ever happened between us. And he's the same child that I always knew and loved." Did you experience that?
Yes. Yes. The last probably 8 months.
And to me, it's a classic case of the child developing a sense of what pleases dad and what pleases mom. Because if the child cries when he's leaving dad and going to mom, he knows dad's going to like that. But when he's 5 minutes down the road with mom, he's going to do whatever pleases mom. And that's where a child develops two separate personalities. And you can imagine that managing two separate personalities at a very young age is very, very damaging on a young person, even to the extent that there becomes enmeshment with the alienating parent who's trying to generate that type of behavior, because enmeshment is simply where you can't tell where the parent's personality ends and where the child's personality begins. And can you imagine childhood being robbed of your own personality?
Yeah, and I saw it.
Sadly.
And it comes back to my final comment when I was doing my presentation down in Houston. Can we just stop fighting? Can we please put our children ahead of our personal needs? Because if we don't, then we're killing our own children. We're destroying them. And that's not co-parenting. That's not co-parenting at all. And It's not fair to them. They should be allowed to develop their own personality and live their life to the best of their ability.
I don't like the word because it's disrespectful to use kid when you're referring to a child, because they are a child. But in this case, every one of those little ones, they have every right to just be a kid. And parents are so selfish, and it involves their own emotions being more controlling than their love for their child, that they steal that right from their children because of their emotions.
Well, I see why you don't watch the movies. Your reality is definitely sadder and more frightening than I could imagine, which is, why, you should get paid loads of money to have to face that every day. But
I do like how you think, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, it's frightening to me. I mean, having been together with my wife for 32 years, and we just, we had challenges, but we never came to those points.
But
and I know lots of people who have.
Yeah, but on the flip side of that, you've got 3 fairly successful children out there who are good, healthy, well-adjusted adults.
Mm-hmm.
And that is simply the byproduct of good parents. So there's a backhanded compliment for you and your lovely bride.
We appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you for being a good parent, because you can see in the two of you, and I'm not insinuating you are a bad parent by any means, Rod, but you can see the value of good parenting and putting the child's interest first versus putting the parent's interest over and above the child, and using the child to further your own emotions and interests.
Yeah. I mean, I like to think that, part of my being a good parent is just that my wife is a good parent, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we've worked together at it. And so, it's tough when you're trying to be the good parent and the other person isn't. I'm sure that complicates things. So.
And I've seen that in the courtroom bear itself out, that the parent who will take the witness stand and admit that the other parent is in fact a good mom or a good dad, they do so much better than the parent who is blameless and it's everybody else's fault.
Sure.
And I'm sitting at a table with the dichotomy in front of me. Your wife and you, who just said she was a great mom and that's what made you a better dad. And on this side of the table, it is the worst of all divorce cases, period. And I'm not sure how many of your listeners know Rod's story, but it's Rod's story.
Yeah.
And I will leave that to him, but it is by far the worst in parenting.
I agree.
Yeah, it wasn't much fun. But it changed my life. It took me into a different direction than I would have ever considered. And I mean, it's why I wrote my book, For the Love of Eric, and which is kind of that story with push and lessons learned and, trying to make change. And that's kind of what I hope we've done here today. I mean, we went a little over our normal 30, 35 minutes, but this has been good stuff, I think.
May I say one last thing?
Sure.
Please? And I have said this publicly multiple times, but having lived through the experience with Rod, he had every reason in the world to commit suicide, to go into major depression, to become a mental health crisis, to become a drug addict, an alcoholic, or just a completely miserable person. but he made the choice to use his life's experience, as tragic as they were, to make other people's lives better.
Yeah.
And I could not be more proud of anyone, because I don't know anyone who has ever faced such a tragedy, and to turn it into good for other people is just beyond human. Thank you.
Well, those are,
I agree.
well, thank you guys. That's super kind words. I appreciate it. I don't know that it's, I don't always feel that I'm worthy, but it is what we do, and it's our push to, and that's kind of the drive, one of the driving forces of doing what we do with our broadcast here, is to help families live together better. Married, divorced, but live together better.
Well, and I want to thank you both, because I'm sitting here looking to my right and looking to my left, and I'm seeing the best of examples and the worst of examples. And of course, that's not a reflection on you, Rod, because you turn the worst into great things, helping other people. And I certainly hope your show helps other parents and couples to survive marriage and survive divorce, and hope it makes better children for the future of our country. Thank you both for what you do.
We appreciate you being on a second time.
Joining us.
I don't think it was our intention. We try and keep it a little lighthearted, but it got real serious. But this is a serious topic for us to address. So again, apologize for it being a little longer than usual, but this was well worth, I hope, the added time. So Charlie, thanks again for coming back and doing a second episode with us. And we'll keep doing what you're doing and being a fantastic advocate for kids out there.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Well, then until next time, Scott, we'll call it a day. I'm Rod.
I'm Scott.